Hi, I am Jules Keeper. I recently joined Coco Pharmaceuticals as their Chief Data Officer, tasked with creating and implementing their data strategy. I joined at an interesting time. The company is growing fast, but many of their systems and practices are no longer fit for purpose. A key part of the problem is the way they manage data, which is why they brought me in. In my previous video, I described my plan for my first 3 months at Coco Pharmaceuticals. It was a standard 30-60-90-day plan allowing me to explain how I was spending my time while I established the data strategy. The first 30 days was all about meeting people, building a detailed picture of the organization, and determining how I can help. At this point, I have just had my 30-day review with the board and they have agreed with my proposal, albeit with a request to keep costs to a minimum. One of my core beliefs is that governance should enable people to work better, both as an individual and through collaboration with their colleagues. Governance also should be actively monitoring the operation of the business, guiding people and systems to do the right thing and to raise alerts when things are going wrong. Finally, governance should operate in the business context. Through its monitoring, relevant people in the business receive valuable insights into how well the organization is operating. When I looked back at the 31 to 60-day part of my plan, I should be defining the data strategy and its associated governance program now, but my previous investigations had revealed a problem. Moving to personalized medicine, Coco Pharmaceuticals' principal business strategy was never going to be just a data problem. It touches security, privacy, finance, infrastructure, software development, drug development, even sustainability. If I built a data governance program on my own, I would end up as one more silo among the many I had already found in the business. So instead of starting with policies, I started with people. I invited the leaders who already carried governance responsibility, whether or not governance was in their job title, to join a small working group. This included Ivor Padlock, Chief Information Security Officer for Security Governance; Faith Broker, Chief Privacy Officer for Privacy Governance; Reggie Mint, Chief Financial Officer for Corporate Governance; Gary Geek, our Infrastructure Lead for IT Infrastructure Governance; Polly Tasker, Senior Software Manager for Software Development Governance. 2 specialists joined soon after, once it became clear how much their domains overlapped with everyone else's. Aaron Overview on Data Architecture and Data Sharing, and Tessa Tube, Lead Research at Coco Pharmaceuticals on Drug Development. None of us had worked together on governance before. Each of us had our own tools, our own spreadsheets, our own idea of what a policy or a control actually was. The first job wasn't to write anything down. It was to get everyone looking at the same page, literally. Before we could collaborate, we needed a shared home for our definitions. The enabler I had chosen to support me was the open source project called Egeria, see http://egeria-project.com. This technology builds a knowledge graph of the business operations that can guide people and help them collaborate. It also delivers insight to various tools and context to AI systems. Because it is open source, we could download and use it without delay. Gary Geek had Egeria running for us within a couple of hours, using Egeria workspaces, no lengthy infrastructure project required. One of the key features offered by Egeria that caught my eye was Literate governance through Dr.Egeria. What is Literate governance? The concept borrows heavily from Donald Knuth's philosophy of literate programming. Instead of writing disconnected code or filling out rigid forms, governance officers, data stewards and engineers can author integrated documents that explains why a structure exists in plain natural language, right alongside the precise commands that create it. Dr.Egeria's Markdown-based architecture is natively built for this. A single Dr.Egeria file is essentially a structural narrative document. It can contain blocks of descriptive text, separated by native Markdown commands that define governance definitions, asset schemas, or module relationships. When the document is passed to the Dr.Egeria processor, it interprets the document and creates the appropriate definitions in Egeria's knowledge graph. The command language includes report requests, so it is easy to validate that the content has been loaded and linked correctly. The benefit of this approach is its lifecycle simplicity. A person can author a multi-step document that lays out a new project or set of governance definitions and load it into Egeria. The original document can be shared with team members for peer review. Since the Dr.Egeria document is completely human-readable, others can review and edit the document itself, sending the updated file around for discussion. The document can be validated and reprocessed by Dr.Egeria as many times as it takes to get it right. Looking back, that mattered more than I expected. It meant our very first workshop resulted in something real sitting in Egeria, rather than a set of notes waiting for someone to action later. One final piece of preparation and we were ready to go. All public AI services are good at working with text, and the details in this level of governance definition is not business sensitive. Before the meeting I picked Claude and trained it with the Dr.Egeria templates. This meant it could flesh out the details in our definitions, leaving the governance leaders to focus on the essentials. I tested Claude's understanding of Dr.Egeria by creating a simple set of project definitions showing my 30, 60, 90-day plan and a solution blueprint of the data strategy framework. Here is the plan in Egeria, expressed as a campaign and a set of nested projects. Since Peter and Aaron had no access to project management tools, I built out the first level of tasks that we would all be working on as well. This created visibility of our work to the other executives as we brought them into the Egeria fold. This is the Egeria solution blueprint version of the data governance framework from the previous video. The blueprint defines a set of components and how they fit together. I had also created a glossary for the terms used in the framework so that people could look them up once they had forgotten what they mean. These types of diagrams are typically created in drawing tools. They are great for review meetings, but they go no further. When we add them to Egeria, they become part of the business context that guides people and automation, like AI systems, from the operational detail to understanding the business relevance. I took Aaron and Peter through the definitions. Peter created a Git repository to act as a backup for the original files. This is available for you to view. The link is in the video description. The first working session of the governance leaders was ran as a single afternoon, in one room, with one goal: to agree the handful of business imperatives, threats, and regulatory pressures that all of our individual governance domains needed to respond to. The first brainstorming session gave us 3 business imperatives, including the shift to personalized medicine, cyber resilience, and long-term sustainability. 4 threats covering cyber attacks, loss of competitive position, the talent shortage we were already feeling, and disruption to our supply chain. Finally, 3 regulatory requirements covering financial reporting, clinical trial conduct, and the rules governing pharmaceutical manufacturing and distribution. Getting the wording right, so a description made sense to a security specialist and a drug development lead at the same time, was the hardest part of the afternoon. This is where I leaned again on Claude. I would describe what we needed to capture, and it would turn our shorthand into a clear, consistent definition using Dr.Egeria command syntax, leaving the room free to argue about substance rather than sentence structure. To illustrate what we were doing in the broader context of the organization's needs, we can look at the Egeria documentation describing how to set up a governance program. This is part of the contribution I was able to make to Egeria, for which I am particularly proud of. In our meeting, we had been defining the governance drivers, which are shown at the top here. The next step is to drill down and define the policies that will respond to the drivers. Linked under that would be the governance controls, which is where we start defining how the governance policies will be implemented. We wanted to get the governance drivers and policies in quickly since this frames the work on the governance controls that will be done by our teams. There was no stopping Reggie Mint, a CFO. Reggie Mint recalled the supplier fraud incident that his team had been wrestling with since before I joined, and wrote it up as a governance driver in his own words. I wanted to linger here for a moment. This is a plain markdown document, the kind any of us could write in a text editor, on a plane, without touching a database or asking Gary for access to anything. Reggie wrote this one himself, in a coffee break, about a problem his own team had lived through. That was the whole point. Nobody needed training in, or access to Egeria, to contribute. Just their knowledge and experience. This is what Reggie's definition looks like in Egeria. Another point to notice is the domain identifier. Governance domain identifiers are used to indicate the type of governance that this definition belongs to. Egeria has an initial list that you can extend, modify, or completely replace with your own definitions. I suggested that we use the standard definitions as a starting point. We also organized our governance definitions into folios, one for each of us, so we agreed on who was responsible for each definition. Further down the same document, once the governance drivers were done, we started adding the policies and linking them to the drivers that they responded to. This is the moment the exercise stopped being my document and started being our program. Reggie's threat, written from a finance perspective, was now formally linked to a data governance obligation I had written from mine. Neither of us had to leave our own domain to see how the two connected. Egeria joined the dots for us. By the end of the afternoon, we had a first pass of these governance drivers and policies written up and loaded into Egeria. Looking back, 4 things made this land so quickly. First, we started from drivers, not policies. Everyone could agree on why governance mattered before anyone had to compromise on how. Second, the tool got out of the way. Markdown in, structured metadata out. Nobody had to learn a new interface to contribute on day one. Third, we showed progress immediately. Taking a first pass to the founders that same week, rather than after months of committee work, built confidence in the approach instead of the usual skepticism that governance initiatives attract. Finally, we used AI to do the wordsmithing, leaving the governance leaders to focus on the essentials. The team kept expanding the definitions the very next day, bringing in their teams as necessary, without me chasing anyone. That was the real signal this was going to stick. If you are curious to see the files, they are on the web. And you can load them into your own Egeria environment through Egeria workspaces. So what is next? I was still on the hook to define the data governance program. Join me in the next video as I work with my team on completing its definition and begin on the implementation.